The first signs were subtle. Leaves tinged with a faint, unnatural luminescence, vines writhing gently against the wind's direction, the forest floor growing eerily silent as birds abandoned their nests. It began after a meteorite crash deep within Blackwood National Park, scattering spores invisible to the naked eye, but potent enough to change the very fabric of life. Within weeks, the forest transformed. Trees, once stoic sentinels of the earth, grew twisted and monstrous, their bark splitting to reveal sinewy tendrils that pulsed like veins. Flowers emitted sickly sweet fragrances that lured wildlife closer, only to ensnare them in thorny traps. The spores infected humans, too, mutating them into grotesque hybrids of flesh and flora, beings tethered to the forest's will. Samantha Reyes adjusted the straps on her oxygen mask, her heartbeat pounding louder than the eerie stillness around her. The mask was her lifeline. The air inside the forest was laced with spores, each breath a gamble without protection. Behind her, a small group of survivors moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the dense moss carpeting the ground. "Keep close," she whispered, her voice muffled by the mask. She scanned the overgrown path ahead, her flashlight beam slicing through the oppressive darkness. The trees loomed like twisted giants, their branches reaching out as if to snatch intruders. "Do you think the research station is still intact?" asked Dr. Ian Carter, a microbiologist clutching a satchel filled with samples and notes. "If it is, it's our best shot at figuring out what the hell this stuff is," Samantha replied. She didn't mention the odds. Most expeditions into the forest never returned. A sudden rustling in the underbrush froze the group. Samantha raised her hand, signaling for silence. The noise grew louder, closer. From the shadows emerged what had once been a deer. Its body was a grotesque fusion of animal and plant, antlers entwined with thorny vines, its eyes replaced by glowing spores. It let out a guttural screech before charging. "Move!" Samantha shouted, firing her rifle. The bullets tore through the creature, a green ichor spraying from its wounds, but the forest itself seemed to react. Vines uncoiled from nearby trees, lashing out like living whips. The group sprinted, weaving between the mutated foliage. One of the survivors, a young man named Eric, tripped and screamed as a vine coiled around his ankle, dragging him towards the trees. Samantha turned, firing desperately, but it was too late. The forest swallowed him whole, his screams fading into the cacophony of rustling leaves and creaking wood. By the time they reached the research station, their numbers had dwindled to 3. The structure was partially overrun, vines crawling over its walls and windows, but it still stood. Samantha kicked open the door, ushering the others inside. She slammed it shut and jammed a chair under the handle. "We're not safe here for long," she panted. Dr. Carter immediately began examining the equipment, searching for anything useful. "These spores, they're unlike anything I've ever seen," he muttered, pulling out a vial of the glowing green substance. "They don't just infect, they integrate. The forest isn't just alive, it's aware." "What about a cure?" asked Lena, the last remaining survivor besides Samantha. "A cure might be impossible," Carter admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. "But a counteragent to block the spores, that might buy us time." A sudden banging on the door cut their conversation short. The sound wasn't human. Samantha motioned for silence, gripping her rifle tightly. The banging grew louder, and then the door splintered as a mass of vines burst through, writhing like snakes. Behind them stood a human-plant hybrid, its face barely recognizable as it hissed and clawed at the air. "Run!" Samantha yelled, firing her weapon. The group scrambled deeper into the station, dodging vines and shoving equipment in their path, to slow the advancing monstrosities. With the counteragent synthesized and a small vial in Samantha's hand, the group knew they had one last chance. The forest's core, the origin point of the infection, had to be destroyed. Guided by Carter's research, they navigated deeper into the forest, each step taking them closer to its pulsating heart. The air grew thicker, the glowing spores so dense they seemed to form a living mist. The ground throbbed beneath their feet, as though the forest itself was alive and aware of their presence. In a clearing they found it, a massive, otherworldly structure that had grown around the meteorite. The heart was a pulsating mass of vines, glowing green and emitting a low, resonant hum. "This is it," Carter whispered. "If we destroy this, it might sever the connection." "And if it doesn't?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. Then we die trying," Samantha said grimly. The heart reacted as they approached, tendrils shooting out like spears. Samantha threw the vial with all her strength, shattering it against the core. The counteragent seeped into the pulsating mass, and the forest screamed, a deafening otherworldly sound that shook the ground. The heart convulsed, its glow dimming as the counteragent spread. Around them, the forest seemed to wither, the vines retreating, and the mutated creatures collapsing. But the victory was not without cost. The heart's death throes sent shockwaves through the clearing, knocking the survivors off their feet. When Samantha opened her eyes, the forest was silent. The air was clear, the spores gone. Carter and Lena lay unconscious but breathing. She helped them to their feet, the three of them limping back toward civilization. The forest was no longer alive, but the scars it left behind, on the land and on their souls, would never fade. Samantha glanced back one last time, knowing that while they had survived, the world would never be the same. The spores were gone, but their origins and their potential remained a mystery.